Welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today I got a real treat for you. The better Joe here. We have Joe Jarrin, and his official title as of today, which is January 9th. He is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Finance and Budget of the Office of the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Joe, say what's up to everybody.
Hey, everyone. Hey, thanks for having me, Joseph. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah. So, Joe, I love titles. Titles, especially in our industry, titles are so great because half the time they don't talk about exactly what what we do. So your title is super long. I'm not going to repeat it, but give us kind of the working title of what you've been doing for this current administration and what the day to day is like for Joe.
Thank you, Joseph. Absolutely. So I'm a political appointee with the Biden-Harris administration. I came in 2021 with the administration, and I have this long title with 8 words in it. But what it effectively means is that at the United States Department of Transportation, working under Secretary Pete Buttigieg and the leadership here at DOT, I'm effectively working under the chief financial officer for the department and putting together the budget for the whole department. And USDOT, for those who don't know, it's one of the semi-larger federal agencies. We have a number of administrations that report up to us, like the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Aviation Administration, Federal Transit Administration, Federal Railroad Administration, a number of safety administrations, and the Maritime Administration, and I may have left one or two out, but the Office of the Secretary is sort of the umbrella organization over those other administrations, and we actually also administer a number of grants as part of our function. So one of the things that DOT basically does and is exactly that, is the grant making. We send out billions of dollars to the states and the cities to build out their roads, their bridges, their rail, their transit, their airport terminals, ports, and any other transportation infrastructure. We have a few other functions as well, especially rulemaking, which is a big deal for us. But the big thing that I focus on the budget side is really the monies that go out in those grants, and so it's a very large budget, actually. And one thing that happened 3 years ago, right, as when I came into the organization, was a major piece of legislation was passed, which I think, Joseph, you probably talked a lot about in your podcast, is the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this was $660 billion of funding over 5 years that DOT was tasked with delivering to the American public for improved transportation infrastructure. And our annual budget grew to an unprecedented $144 billion annual budget. So it's a huge budget for a very large organization, and a lot of money is going out across the country for these important functions. And my title speaks to that, because obviously it's a budget function, but I also have been very involved in the performance management for the department. And what that means is, all this money that's going out, is it actually doing what it's supposed to be doing? I mean, when this bill passed in Congress, it was a bipartisan law. We got members of both sides of the aisle to sign on to this. And we were promising the American public a lot with this bill to really solve the crisis of failing infrastructure, of our bridges collapsing, which was terrible, right? We remember the tragedy in Minneapolis or Minnesota. The roadway miles, you look at how many roads are in terrible condition across the country. Just the basic infrastructure for our goods to make it from point A to point B is one of the major piece of this. Now, are we delivering on that? We have now, and I'll be speaking more about this as we go, Joseph, but we've been spending and obligating our term of art and spending funds for a big chunks of this now. We're 3 years into this 5-year law, right? And so we happy to report we have a lot to show for it. But it's not just about the money's being spent. It's like our bridge is actually getting fixed. Our roadway miles actually getting repaired. Our airport terminals being built. And so as we talk, I can speak a lot more about that. But that is a lot of what the role I've
No,
played, which is to track that.
yeah, and I appreciate the depth of your answer. I hope you have time because I got a ton of questions just from that answer alone. So start off a political appointee. For those that don't know, political appointee is somebody that is put into a position, not necessarily voted into a position. My question is, there might be people out there who want to be politically appointed to positions. So run us down real quick your career path and how you got to be in position to be politically appointed, which is cool.
Well, thank you. It's been my honor to serve as a political appointee these last 3+ years. My career before that was primarily for 25 years in local government. I worked in the New York City local government. Started out as an analyst in the mayor's budget office right out of grad school. I had the privilege to work in the mayor's budget office in New York City for over 10 years. Worked my way up into leadership positions there. And then had the honor actually of becoming a deputy commissioner for budget and the CFO for the New York City Department of Transportation, which is the agency in New York that is responsible for the streets. It's not the MTA, which a lot of folks think it is sometimes, which runs the buses and subways. But there's a DOT in New York that is responsible for all the streets in the city, most of them. There's some state-owned roads, but we're really the streets agency. Over 800 bridges within New York City belong to New York City DOT, including the beauty of Brooklyn Bridge and the Queensboro Bridge, a lot of those major bridges, but then also the smaller ones throughout the city, like even pedestrian overpasses and the like. We also ran Staten Island Ferry, which is one of if not the largest, one of the largest ferry systems in the country, that runs between Manhattan and Staten Island, which, if those who don't know, that's the best way to see the Statue of Liberty if you take that ferry. Anyhow, I had 9 years as CFO for that agency, and then I was elevated to be the executive deputy commissioner, which broadened my scope into handling human resources and IT and facilities. So I had a lot of responsibility at executive levels at New York City DOT. Throughout that period, I was also responsible for the program delivery, with a lot of major capital projects happening within the city. And going hand in hand with that is as being the grants officer for the department. I mean, we received a lot of federal funding for a lot of our projects, and state funding as well. And so having that 25 years of experience within the budget and grants world, I had a lot of interest in the federal space. Never mind my own personal interest in the federal space, but just as a grantee, having been on that end of federal funding coming to the city, it was real interest of mine to see, well, how would it be to have my career go in that direction? I was lucky to have good contacts and mentors who made me aware of opportunities within the new Biden-Harris administration. I threw my hat in. It's a process that I would hate to describe, because I think it's different for a lot of different appointees. They do have an open call for resumes when the new administration starts, that folks sometimes and often actually land positions through just by submitting a resume. I happen to know a lot of the folks who were part of the administration who knew me as well, and knew my experience and invited me to apply for the position.
I gotta push back against you, just real quick. I gotta push back. You said the 4-letter word. You said luck. And come on, Joe, you and I both know that, there's such thing called luck. But to get in those positions, to get those, those names in your Rolodex, to get, I guess on that platform to be seen as somebody to say, hey, go put in for this position, Joe, you had to make yourself into a certain person. You had to take action in certain things. You had to put yourself in position for that. So tell us about what that looks like, and how they might be just graduating college. They might be in a position now where they feel stagnant and they want to be able to go on the federal level. They want to be in those conversations. How can they put themselves in that position?
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, that's my favorite question, and I do a lot. I go back to my own colleges or anywhere where I can talk to younger folks. One thing I've done in every role I've had is create spaces for internships for younger folks to learn exactly what you just asked. How do you get to be all these roles that I've played? Look, I was a kid from Queens in New York City, lower income family, immigrant family. I had from the very beginning an interest in transportation and bridges and trains, and so here I am, in the second half of my life, really doing what I thought I would be doing as a little kid. But so I have that to brag about maybe. But I'll say that I put myself throughout in seeking just how to achieve that goal, as a kid, and in college and high school, even volunteering for everything I could possibly volunteer for that would put me in the right place, whether it was, and sometimes for free. I know we don't like free internships. I agree with that, but that's not a good thing. Actually, it really limits access and on an equity level, especially. But I did do my share of those as well, just to like learn and to have people know who I was and that kind of thing. Look, it's a cliche, but just hard work and seeking out opportunities. Find your mentors, very important. Nick, the people want to mentor others, they do, and it's okay to ask
100%.
for advice and to ask questions. And when you have, it may not even be your boss, and maybe your boss's boss or a colleague who's at that level, or someone else who maybe looks like you. I'll just throw that out there. And that was important for me too, to seek out, folks who had gone through your path that you would be going through. And so that's look, we could do a whole podcast
Yeah.
on that topic as well, but I've had a charmed career, I will say. But I will also say I'm usually the one that's turning off the lights at night. I'm in addition to any other talent I may have, the hard work does matter quite a bit,
Yeah.
and it's just about that.
No, and I appreciate you letting me pull that out of you, because whenever somebody tells me, "Oh, you got to get lucky," I'm like, okay, you just disrespected me by saying that I can't put the work in to get there. So thank you for thank you for doing that. For the listeners out there, the reason why Joe and I are having this show today is because Joe's last day serving with this agency is tomorrow, which is a Friday. Which is, it's interesting to me, like, oh, when your last day is going to be. It's not like, a normal job where somebody comes in and says, hey, we're making cuts or you're getting fired or whatever. But I want to know kind of what the day in the life, not in these last days, but what a day in the life, let's say 18 months ago for Joe, you get to the office on a random Tuesday. What does that Tuesday look like?
Yeah, no, well, for this job in particular, and it's been different for some of my roles, but for this role, we really were on deadline after deadline after deadline to get these monies out. I mean, these numbers I gave you, the $660 billion, I mean, divide that by 5, and that's how much we needed to see monies go year by year. And what that meant is, and again, helping both the federal workers, but then also the grantee community understand how can they apply for these funds, how can they then do what they need to do to get those funds obligated, and really helping to move these funds to do what they were intended to do. So I say all that because the budget process, number one, in the federal space, it's continuous. Courses could be taught on just what's involved with and folks may have heard something about a shutdown recently. I mean, all that that is a day-by-day activity where you are both building the budget for the coming year. You're trying to get agreement with the Congress on the current year's budget, which is what the shutdown was about, and then also making sure you're spending responsibly what was approved for the previous budget, which is you're now in. So it's a lot of work, and so my day to day really is any aspect of that on the budget side. Certainly, being involved in ensuring that the team has what they need to deliver funds as needed. Working with the operating administrations because they each have their own budget offices as well, and so there's a lot of dialogue with the program people who are actually doing the work, but then also with our White House Office of Management and Budget. So it's a combination of communication with all these folks to make sure that what's needing to happen is happening. Getting in the weeds a little bit. I'm as an executive, like many executives, sometimes we miss being the analyst, so I'll get in there and pull the spreadsheets up, and I love spreadsheets, so that's my happy space, I guess I'll say. And we've really been doing a lot to build new systems and new processes to help some of these things happen faster. In the performance management space, that was a lot of what I was doing as well. There's requirements in the federal government to post quarterly deliverables of what we've actually accomplished for some of our priority goals. There's an annual report that we put out annually that then we review internally quarterly on how are we performing. There's 125 performance goals in the DOT annual performance plan that each has its own tracking and everything from like as I mentioned, fixing bridges to fixing roads, airports. But then one big one that I want to call out is traffic safety. And you see here in my little graphic in the background, we have safety right on the top. These are our 6 strategic goals, and our North Star, as we like to say, is safety, both airline safety, which is important, obviously super important, but roadway safety, which is right now the crisis of the nation, which we have been really focused on addressing. Over 40,000 people getting killed on the roads every year. It's just unacceptable and trending in the wrong direction until a couple of years ago. And I'm happy to tell you, with a lot of the investments under the bipartisan infrastructure law, that trend now changed, and 10 quarters in a row, fatalities have been going down. But going down, it's still not enough. Like we want to get it to zero and really address that crisis. So my day-to-day even includes things like that. Like, how are we tracking that? How are we analyzing what the problems are? Where can we maybe target investments in a more direct way? So it's a whole combination of that. But I will, like I said, it can be different day by day.
And I have zero clue what it looks like, working on Capitol here, or like what actually happens there, or like how you guys communicate. Is it emails? Or are you doing like 60-minute lunches with people? Like it, what is it? How often are you in the office? How often are you behind a computer? How many Zoom calls a day on average? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, no, a lot of email. I get a lot done by email, let me tell you. But meetings, a lot of meetings to bring the right folks together so everyone understands what the goals are, what our actions are, what we need to get done for the next period. And all these different issues like have their own meetings, different program folks, like you have like the highway folks, you have the airline folks, you have the rail folks. So you need to really, spend that time with those folks to make sure we're communicating the right information. So my calendar is fairly crazy. I think with most folks that I in my space, we maybe get we're famous for half-hour meetings, which
okay. That's efficient, baby.
I'm really struck by. Yeah, no, it's like 1 half-hour meeting after. So like I know different organizations manage differently, but that's a lot of the MO that we use, and some of them in person. We've been working hybrid. We have some days that we have to be in the office. I'm in almost every day, but for the team in general, they're required to be in person certain days of the week, and then can work from home or elsewhere other days. So while we do a lot in Zoom or Teams or whatever it may be, we also have a number of in-person meetings as well.
Wow. Okay. Thanks for answering that. Let's talk the Infrastructure Act, right? What was it? Well, a colleague of mine, Shane Silsby, you might know him also. He has a book called Managing for Meteors. And like, I like the analogy. It's a meteor that hits Earth or hits your Earth and kind of shakes things up. So what was it like in Joe's life I mean, you probably knew about the bill and what was in it, how it was being formed, but when it actually got put out and the cogs of the government had to start turning, what was that like for you?
Yeah, no, I was a grantee in New York, hoping for the best in that bill. One thing about that bill is that, in addition to doing all these additional things that were put in the bill, like this is a once in a generation, hopefully not once in a lifetime, um, uh, level of investment in every aspect of transportation infrastructure. So there was a lot more monies and more programs in the bill than usual. But there was nothing actually new about the process for the bill. The way transportation funding is normally done, every 5-6 years, there's another reauthorization bill that just continues our formula programs that have existed, some of these for decades. And so when the bill doesn't get passed, and when there's a delay in having a new reauthorization, as we call it, it creates a concern for the grantees, because we're like, well, we need to plan for our transportation projects that normally would have some share of federal funding. And so there was a concern actually at the time before the BIL passed that there was a gap in time that we were very anxious to really have any reauthorization bill, never mind like this once in a generation increase in transportation funding. So I was experiencing all of that and following it very closely. We actually, in my old hat, my local government days, we had a lot of views and opinions about what should actually go into the bill that would be helpful for local governments. So I was involved with a number of associations in my capacity as a local government official to express those views and make sure we had white papers that would go to the Washington folks to hopefully put in things that we felt were important for us. And some of those did make it in. So I was following all that, but at the same time, as you know, I had an interest in maybe joining the federal government, certainly in the Biden-Harris administration, which I had a really tremendous respect for. So it was super exciting when that bill passed, and I will say by that point I knew that I would be making the move to the federal government, and I started working in this federal role just a few weeks after the BIL passed, knowing that this would be my role, basically. Yes.
Gotcha. That's cool. So the bill passed, you started working, and then you hit the ground running from there. One thing I like, and it was explained to me pretty succinctly, how to find what funds are available for like what type of agency. And it's I love how plain it's laid out on the website, like how to go and find the money for what you need. I'm sure there was a lot of, whenever something like that and there's a lot of money made available to people, there's some agencies, cities that are smaller, they're like scratching their head like, how do I even go about navigating, getting some of this money? Some of the they might have to hire like a consultant agency or engineering firm to help them with that, or the grant writing firm to help them with that. Some of the bigger cities have it in-house already. How was it decided to make it so plain and simple to go out and find what money is available and then to actually receive that money?
Yeah, no, this is a really important question. So let me start by saying that, and I think your viewers might know this already, but let me just frame it a little bit. There's two very important pots of monies that have slightly different ways that local governments can sort of receive them. There's formula funds, which are allocated to the states. They go directly to the states, and the states generally decide what happens with that money. And that's the majority of our federal funding, okay? So, I'll just say the need for a local government, small or large, to have a good relationship with the state, for the state to understand their needs and to address the needs in those small or large cities is crucial. And this was my life as a local government official in New York, to really negotiate with the state to say, well, really, can you give us some funding for this or that we might need? Because the state really has that decision-making power. The federal government doesn't make those decisions for the formula funds, okay? There's approval that the federal government has to make, but the selection of the projects is not something the federal government gets involved in. For the other pot, though, not the formula, but what we call the competitive programs. Sometimes we use the term discretionary programs, although that can mean other things. Those are the ones that we have expanded greatly under the BIL for localities and counties and any entity in the government to directly apply for with the support of the state. One would hope and expect to then meet their needs for different things. So we had a whole slew of new and a number that existed already, but maybe that were reframed. But then a whole slew of new programs. There were over 40 new programs under the BIL that didn't exist before, that different localities could apply for. Everything from, there's a program called Safe Streets for All, which I mentioned, the traffic fatality crisis. This was really intended and has actually gone to address the need to re-engineer streets and to create public spaces that are not detrimental to pedestrians and cyclists and even motorists from getting killed from having unsafe streets. So this program has been one where small and large localities can apply directly and go after it. So we that's one example. There's also a whole slew of others that I mentioned. What we've done, though, because we know, to your question, that some of these localities have never applied for federal funding before, or even if they have, it's not something that they generally do all the time or have capacity to do. So we've really built out on our website something called a DOT Navigator that provides a whole slew of information that normally you would, and a lot of folks still do, and I'm not telling folks not to do this. If you're hiring a consultant to help you get a grant and win that grant, go for it. That will help, I'm sure. But it shouldn't just be those entities who even know, what you would need to do to get the grant, right? It should just be public knowledge, and we've gone out of our way to put on our website all the information on the DOT Navigator, from like, even if you're thinking about applying for a grant, here's what's involved. And look, I'll be the first one to say, as a former grantee and now in the federal space for 3+ years, it's hard. It's not easy. And we wish we could make it easier. And we've done a number of things to make it a little easier, such as like we've combined some of the grants into one, so you don't have to apply for each one separately. We've provided a template for how to do some of this stuff. Some of these grants require benefit cost analyses, which would make some people's heads explode just hearing that term, or run away in fear, like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. But we provide a template for that on how to do it as part of the grant application. So for those entities that have the means, and look, it's not all the entities do. I mean, some of these small cities or towns, they have one person doing a million things, including applying for grants, and they don't have a special person just doing this even. So we understand that we're not suggesting that this solves all the problems, but it does actually at least provide the information and makes it clear what you need to do. And then each of these discretionary grant programs has its own what's called a notice of funding opportunity. NOFO is our term. And so the NOFO has a whole slew of information on what you need to do to get that grant. And it's very transparent and like, boom, like you read the NOFO and then, okay, they want this X, Y, and Z. And if I don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm not going to get this grant. So that's all there. And then also, we don't want people to miss the opportunity for these NOFOs, because these NOFOs, as I mentioned, it's a 5-year program. So every year, some of these programs will have a different NOFO that's released that then has a deadline that tells people you need to apply for this grant by March 1st.
Yeah.
And then if you miss that deadline, then you have to wait till the following year. But hopefully you're not going to miss that deadline. So also on our website, we have provided a dashboard for all of the NOFOs that are coming up for the year, and you can see far in advance, like, oh, okay, I better be ready to apply for that grant by that point, because it will take months to prepare that. And one thing I like to tell people, you don't want to have NOFO FOMO, because if you miss out on that, then oops, so yeah, avoid NOFO FOMO. You got to look at that at those dates and be ready to apply.
Okay. You talk about rule making. we're gonna dive into a couple things, and then I'll let you. We'll talk about all that you've done with the administration. But rulemaking is a, I guess, a new one for me. I didn't know that the rules were set at the, at the USDOT federal level for certain things. Talk about what rules, I guess, were made during your time there, and then some rules that might have came up, and you're like, oh, we shouldn't do that, or we shouldn't pass that.
Well, this is a little bit outside of my space of responsibility, so I'll tread lightly on the rulemaking. But I'll tell you that I'm very proud of a rule that just came out that we issued a few weeks ago on their airlines, to make the airlines comply for providing disability passengers with what they need. And this has been a real issue. So there's a lot of rules sort of relating to that, on how the consumers are treated. There's also rulemaking around clean air requirements and a slew of other things across the department. But definitely, in the airline space, and I'm happy to share with you separately, and maybe you can share with the viewers, some of the rulemaking that's been happening that's really been looking to improve the lives of consumers.
Gotcha. All right, Joe, you sound like you're really humble and you don't like to brag or boast, but we need you to brag and boast about all the things you got accomplished during your time with the federal government. We know that you don't have that much time left, and so you can kind of take a holistic look back and kind of just run off some of the things that you guys did. In all your verticals, the bridge, the airports, the rails, the transportation, the highway, even maritime. And then I'll ask follow-up questions as I see fit, but feel free to just talk about all the cool things you did.
Thank you, Joseph. No, this is my favorite thing to talk about, because wow, what a honor it is for me to have played any role in all these accomplishments. And look, I'm only telling you what the department accomplished. My role was like to kind of follow and see make sure we can track these accomplishments, and also make sure the monies are where they need to be to allow for them. But so much work for across the department, in at the modal level, as we like to say. The modes are the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, and so on. But I'll tick off a few. Number one, we've already announced nearly $570 billion of projects, that came from the BIL. I mean, that's a huge number of announcements. Over 66,000 projects across the country have been funded to proceed. Of that, and this one amazes me, because I mean, one thing well in the public works space, Joseph, at least in the hard infrastructure of public works, these projects take a long time to do, to design a project, and then construction. Sometimes design, and look, sometimes it's the federal funding that maybe slows down things.
No, never.
But even without the federal funding, we all know, there's you got to design the street. You gotta then do a lot of testing and planning, and then finally procurement, right? And then finally get all that in place to start construction. So these things take a while. So no understanding that this law only passed 3 years ago. A little over 3 years ago. The fact that we already have projects started is great, but we actually we can show projects that have been completed already. We have 16,000 projects funded under this BIL funds, that have already been completed or are very close to completion.
Wow.
Now getting into some of the fund figures, I used to work for a roadway agency, DOT. Miles of roads needing to be paved and repaired and reconstructed. This funding has already produced 207,000 miles of roadways that are being repaired or improved from coast to coast. When you do the math on that, it's like crossing the country. I had math on the older number. This is the latest number that just came out off the press, but it's like over 65 times traveling across the country. So I mean, that's huge. And think about what that means for people. Like the not having to worry about having your car impacted from terrible roadways. And bridges. Again, I talk about the crisis of bridges that had been occurring and still occurs. I mean, it's not news actually that there's thousands of bridges that need repair across the country. So that was one of the main concerns with the bipartisan infrastructure law. In fact, there was a new program. One of the new programs in there was to address bridge projects. Over 12,000 projects now, we can say, have been funded and are moving forward to build, repair, or modernize our bridges across the country. And we have a list, actually. We put out a press release a few weeks ago of what are the most economically significant bridges across the country. And there's 18 of them. This special group of bridges across the country that are of particular concern, that needed to be repaired or fixed. And happy to tell you that all 18 of them now are advancing into the needed phase of construction.
Yeah, and I'm guessing some of those might not have been started if it wasn't for the bill that came out.
No doubt, absolutely no doubt. These
Isn't
are
that
not
crazy?
No, I mean, look, let's be honest. Most cities and states, most cities certainly don't have the funding that they would need to get up these projects of these size. I mean, we're talking like big bridges, right? For example, like in New York, the Brooklyn Bridge, which is our big bridge over there. We had a project funded under the Stimulus Act that was over $500 billion. So, sorry, $500 million. I mean, who has that kind of money, right?
All right, you want to go into some of the rail airport transit?
Yeah, definitely. Just give me 1 minute here. I feel like I've lost you here in my screen. Apologies.
I'm still here with it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened over here. Yeah, so on the front of beyond the roadways and bridges, we have on the ports. I mean, Joseph, you probably remember the supply chain crisis when we first came into office. Yeah, I'm partly I'm from New York, but I'm also a Californian, and often had occasion to see those ships lined up at the port of Long Beach, like all the way down. You could see out the beaches in Orange County to these ships was waiting to get into the port. It was like just number one, like almost surreal to see that, but just also just unacceptable. I mean, we need to do better, right? We as a nation, and happy to tell you that we're doing better now. A lot of effort has gone into improving the ports. We do have a port infrastructure improvement grant program under BIL that has been moving forward and funding a lot of important projects. What do you call it? Under a lot of these funds, and together also with the Army Corps of Engineers, a lot of port projects are now moving forward. And this includes now over 1,000 port and waterway projects that have been announced, either by the Army Corps of Engineers or the EPA. They're also involved in port projects, and also DOT to strengthen the supply chain reliability, to speed up the movement of goods, and really avoid those problems moving forward. In air travel, one thing about federal funding for airports is typically in the past, those monies would go to pay for like a lot of the work for the air traffic controllers and the runways, but not necessarily for the airport terminals. This was something that has really grown under the BIL, and we have now 1,500. Over 1,500 projects that are in airports that are modernizing the terminals, that are expanding the operations, and really increasing the efficiency and also improving the runway infrastructure. So these are also huge advancements. And to tell you, some of the airports I've been to, I was recently at the Atlanta airport and seeing the Terminal B. Anyone who goes to Atlanta, that's the biggest airport in the country, in the world. I think
Is it really?
Yeah, it's fascinating how many flights come in and out of that airport. And so there's a major terminal expansion project happening there aided by federal funding there. And that's just one. Another one that I love to talk about is in LA, seeing some of the improvements going on in Los Angeles there, and the new monorail that hopefully will open soon, which I think is imminent. So all that said, a lot of improvements in air travel happening under this. Public transit, this is a part of the transportation infrastructure that really suffered under COVID. Ridership pretty much stopped.
Yeah.
Had no fare box revenue coming in at all, and really suffered as a result. And having, obviously my New York experience, but that being the case there, but any of the large cities that had any kind of rail system or even bus system, there were some major impacts, and really testing the survival of some of these systems moving forward.
Yeah, I remember. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and you're familiar with BART.
Yep.
I mean, lack of better phrase, it screeched to a halt. There were no riders. I'm sure that they had to let people go because there was no ridership, which is unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate. And look, one thing folks should know about transit funding is that we don't, on the federal side, subsidize operations for transit generally. Under COVID, we did provide a rescue package that cities were able to use funding for operations, but normally that's not the case. And post-COVID now, not the case. And so some of these systems are landing back on their feet. The ridership's coming back. Here in Washington, I can tell you, I see the trains that they're packed again, so that's great. But most of the federal funding that goes out for us is to build new transit infrastructure or to replace transit infrastructure. And so one of the big goals of that for the BIL was also our climate initiative, which is to say we don't want just the same old dirty buses getting replaced with new dirty buses, right? There's all these new ways that we can provide clean air buses, low or zero emission buses. And happy to tell you that under BIL, we have built more than 4,600 buses that are now moving forward in American factories. The great majority of them clean buses. So this is also a game changer, I think, in this piece of legislation that now we're seeing the results. And then on rail, this is one that, and I'm a rail enthusiast. I love the choo-choo trains as a kid, and I ride the train as much as I can. But there's such a, I think those of us who follow rail can, will always tell you there's so many more rail corridors that could be in existence to really help folks get around. Maybe not across the whole country, but at least within certain regions. And so one thing that was a big piece of the goals for the BIL, we have our president right now, he likes to call himself Amtrak Joe. He shares our name, Joseph. And so a lot of good resources have gone into this. More than 400 rail projects nationwide have now been announced, including those that are going to modernize and expand the rail networks. We have now the first high-speed rail system under construction between LA and Las Vegas, and so that's going to be huge. That will be done actually. When
is that Chicago Indianapolis one going to get started?
Oh,
you smile.
No. Look, there's a number of other rail, some of them high speed, in the planning phase and that's something that was helped with the BIL as well to move forward some of the plans. You have to start with some of the plans before you can do anything else. But look, a lot of this is going to need more money in the future. I mean, not to cut ahead here, but the BIL was only a 5-year program that ends in 2 years. There's going to need to be another reauthorization, which you've probably spoken about with some other of your interviewees, Joseph. But that'll be the hot topic really in the next couple of years. What's going to happen after BIL, and what new monies will be available to really advance some of the projects that you just mentioned there, like the ones you mentioned there. But at least for now, we do have a number of rail projects, at least some of them in the planning phase, some of them with good construction funding in place to move forward.
Okay, I like it. You got any more you want to run down to us, or is that pretty
Well,
much it?
you know, the there's two more I was hoping to tell you if we have a little more time.
Yeah.
One being that, you know, going back to traffic fatalities, because this one is what we lose sleep over and just cry over. I'm over just thinking about how many people tragically get killed on the roadways every year. So with the funding in the BIL, we're happy to tell you that over 1,600 communities now in all 50 states have funding to improve their roadway safety for drivers and cyclists and pedestrians. This is, again, like I mentioned, look, in New York, people should know we took on something called Vision Zero. It's a term of maybe that you've talked about, and really set a goal to say, no, we want fatalities to go down to zero. And it took what we like to say are the 3 E's, you know, education, and people even understanding what the speed limit is, and for responsible driving. Enforcement, of course, is important. You need to have you know, some penalty for not driving responsibly. But then the third is the engineering. This is where the streets come in, the street designs. Some streets, when you have no sidewalk or you have 6 lanes of roadway that people are expected to cross the street, and it's just, and so we know better. We know these lessons. We know we can do better across the country, and a lot of this funding now is helping cities achieve those benefits and redesigning the streets and making them safer for everyone involved. And so I'm happy to have 1,600 projects now in all 50 states moving forward with those treatments. And finally, you know, one area that I want to call out is what we do for our tribal nations. I don't know if you ever talk about that on your show, Joseph, but this has been a real focus. A little bit.
I was gonna say I wish I could get more of my tribal buddies on, but I haven't, as of yet. I haven't had any on, but I'll work on that for sure.
Maybe I can help you connect it with some folks. But let me tell you, this has been also an area of focus for us. Understanding the great need of infrastructure, transportation projects, not always the same kinds of projects that we're talking about in other areas, but all that said, happy to tell you there's 695 transportation projects that have been announced under BIL across 221 unique tribal nations all across the country. This is unprecedented. So look, a lot of great work that I'm very proud of for the department. I couldn't be more grateful to have been a part of all of this.
Sure. I thank you for doing that. The handoff. That's one thing that I'm passionate about, is that institutionalized knowledge. When I would say an OG, you know, operator, supervisor, they retired from their position with the city, and then the next person in line is like, wait, how did Joe get this done? How did Joe get that done? So what does a handoff look like from you to, do you even know who's next? Do we even know who's next? Or like, you know, what's that because they have 2 more years left, and what's that, you know, how do they take the ball and get it to the end zone also?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that, because this helps me explain that I'm just going to say that I'm going to sound humble again, but I'm a tiny piece of a humongous, like effective, amazing group of people who are the career staff at the federal agency. Okay, you have appointees like me who come in every 4 years. In DOT, we have about 100 appointees. We're an agency of 56,000 people. And so even in my area, I have colleagues who are executives at the who are career staff, and they're going to be here. They work for whoever is the appointee. Okay, they stay. Okay. There may be some discussion around that also happening now, but I will say that these are professionals who have gone through many presidential administrations, who are now the information keepers. Like we've done a lot under this term as an appointee team. We're proud of that, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without the career team there, right there with us. And they're now ready to work with the next team to do the priorities for the next administration. But that said, they have all the knowledge that we have. There's nothing we don't know that isn't like documented and available for them to move forward with, however they'd like to. And we hope, of course, they follow a lot of the good policies that we've had. But even if they don't, some of this is just like, it isn't even ideological or political. It's just like you want to fix your roads, right? You want to
fix
have
the
your
bridge,
right? So a lot of great professionals that are going to do exactly that. Will be here long after I'm gone.
Yeah, I always say Republicans and Democrats ride the same bridges. Like, come on, let's keep them fixed. I always like to leave a space on the show for you to thank mentors that you had along your journey, and then I also want you to give a word of inspiration and motivation to those 56,000 others that are within that USDOT.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, as far as mentors go, look, I've had amazing bosses who were mentors of mine. I've had a lot of other mentors. I mentioned the importance of seeking out your mentors, if you don't have any. But I have. I've worked under some visionary commissioners. That was is the name of the big job in New York City DOT. Jeanette Sadekhan and Polly Trottenberg were both my bosses. These are big names in transportation. And so I'm very lucky to have that to point to give me inspiration, because these are folks who have big ideas and really challenged their teams to really deliver it, and I'm thankful for that. I will just say Secretary Buttigieg, my goodness, folks may know him from television or whatever. I've had the opportunity to work with him, talk to him directly. Just what a principled, smart as anyone will ever meet, communicator, but also just gracious and kind approach to how he deals with staff. And so that's someone who I just really respect, and look forward to seeing great things from. And as far as an inspirational message for the career
they're
team.
in the trenches. They might be here with the next administration. What do you say to say, hey, stay motivated, stay inspired. Let's keep fixing the U.S.
No, look, I'm going to answer this question, but I'll tell you, I don't think they need to hear from me. These are folks that are so motivated. Transportation is a cause. I know you deal with a lot of different public works realms, Joseph, and I'm sure every one of them are super important.
Of course.
But transportation, like when you talk about infrastructure for people to get around, I mean, this is so core to everyone's lives. I mean, I ever since every job I've had, going back to 30 years ago, I woke up thinking oh my God, I'm gonna walk on the sidewalk that is benefiting from my job, or that bus that you're going down, that people need to take to get to jobs or school or doctors or whatever it might be. I mean, it's just so. I mean, not every government role touches everyone's lives, I think, the way this space does, and so. And I may be biased, but I think for the career team that I'm leaving behind, and look, that's the one thing I want folks to really understand, how dedicated and amazing the career team is, and they want to achieve these 6 goals just as much as I do. Traffic safety, economic growth for the nation, climate, which I know maybe is still controversial. I hope not, but we want to make sure our planet is not getting hurt by emissions and other things. Equity, which I know is also sometimes controversial, but honestly, to provide access to everyone to get to their jobs and to be able to benefit from the monies that are available for folks to get around. That's what we're talking about. It's all about fairness, and then transformation is one I have up here too, which is the future. It's kind of an exciting time in transportation. We're seeing AI helping us understand what's happening on the streets in a smarter, faster way. We have automation coming into not just vehicles, which I know we've seen a bit of, but even in the airspace environment, we have new technologies coming in to really help us get around and understand mobility for the future. So I would say that the career team is excited about all of that, and then obviously they're available and so open to advancing all what's needed for the nation. Whether it's the right side or the left side of the political aisle in Trump.
Right. All right. Last question that I ask everybody. Joe, let's say I'm coming to DC and I text you ahead of time. I say, hey, Joe, where can I get the best burger in town? Where are you going to send me?
Oh, no. Oh gosh, I think I knew this question was coming too. But the best burger in DC. Oh, well, here's my problem. I spend a lot of my time in New York still because I have
Oh,
my
okay.
base home there, and I also spend a lot of time in North Carolina because I have a spouse who
Okay.
lives in Winston-Salem.
Oh,
So I know I need. You asked about DC, and not to say they don't have good burgers here. They have excellent burgers here, but I'm gonna call out a spot in Winston-Salem, which I
okay.
love their burger. It's called the Village Tavern, and they have a burger with really delicious bacon jam. That
Bacon
that
jam. Okay.
Yes.
Talk dirty to me. Yeah.
So it's called the Village Tavern. So let me. Sorry, to my DC friends, don't get mad at me, but I think that would be my burger pick.
All good, Joe. Thank you for hopping on the podcast. Did I miss anything? Anything else you wanted to say? Anything else you wanted to get off your chest, or something that's on your heart?
Not at all. Look, thank you. Just, I mean, look, this helped me kind of close out my time here.
Mm.
I have one more business day in this role,
What's that gonna look
and
like? You just gonna walk around the office and high five everybody, or
pretty much, I think I have like 2 meetings of actual like kind of work that I need to like do a couple things. I need to just make sure I close that. I've been like spending a couple weeks now making sure everything that I'm working on is
yeah,
left in a good place. I feel like I've done all of that mostly. I have a couple more things, but yeah, tomorrow definitely will be a day of reflection and to say goodbye to the team, and then just like get ready for what comes next.
yeah. I'm happy to hear when you announce it, whatever comes next for you. I know you were a blessing, and I'm sure a true person to serve with the other 56,000 people that are in the DOT. So thank you for your service and doing that. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. I mean, we got some great people fighting for us on our behalf, in the federal government, and we want to give people flowers while they're still able to smell them. So Joe, thank you for doing that. This has been a fun episode of the Public Works Podcast, and thank you everybody for tuning in.